you, Amla. It was Subhadramati's idea that the title of this talk, Freedom or Death, it was Subhadramati who suggested it. And I'm afraid when she suggested it, the first sort of connotation in my mind wasn't the Buddha. And in fact, many of the men that I live with in the community, that wasn't their connotation either. It was Eddie Izzard that came to mind. Some of you may know Eddie Izzard or his work, and if you don't, I really recommend a YouTube sketch called Cake or Death. Cake or Death is worth watching. Yeah, it's very, 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 very good. I won't try and be Eddie Izzard, and I won't. It's probably not the place, is it? The time or the place. If you want to see my Eddie Izzard impression, ask me later. I was trying to write this talk sort of last night. Well, I've been mulling it over for a few days, a couple of weeks in my head, and nothing very much would sort of seem to come out. And then last night I thought, okay, I'm going to really just sort of think about it and get down and do it. I've got this shiny new computer that I've bought myself, and so I sat with this mind mapping software on this shiny new iMac. Very, very pleased with the iMac. and so I had the evening free to myself, as it were, and I ended up watching Netflix. And Netflix is pretty addictive, isn't it? I was watching Suits, and one episode finishes and another one starts without you having to do anything. 40 minutes, and then it's another one and another one. And in my case, it's more like Freedom or Netflix. How it was last night. Anyway, I do think I have got some things to say on this Buddha Day. It's very, very lovely to be talking on Buddha Day. In a way, well, I was just reminiscing with Amla Yodin, the first festival I ever led after my ordination was a Buddha Day festival. Quite a lot of things went wrong that day, so including a firework smashing into Canary Wharf Tower and breaking glass and all sorts of things that went wrong. So I'm very glad that today it hasn't. It's been really lovely, actually, to Subhadramati and Amla Yodin. But of course, we're recollecting the Buddha's enlightenment, and that's what I want to particularly focus on. But before I come on to that, I want to just say a little bit about this word freedom, because in this context, it's a very specific meaning. It's a translation of the word vimutti, or vimukti in Sanskrit. And it isn't what you might associate normally with the word freedom. It's not that. It's a very specific type of freedom that we're talking about. It's not, so for example, freedom to do whatever you want. It's not social, political freedom. All of those things are great. I'm not saying that they're not worth striving for, but this isn't what the Buddha meant by vimutti or vimukti. Vimukti is a stage on the spiral path leading to enlightenment, and it's the penultimate stage on the spiral, just before enlightenment. So just before full and perfect enlightenment is achieved, there's this stage that is called freedom, emancipation, liberation. And of course it's an internal state, it's a state of mind, it's a freedom from everything that holds us back, everything that holds us back and keeps our consciousness, our mind small. It's a liberation from greed, from hatred, from delusion. It's a freedom to be creative and responsive and fearless. It's a freedom that manifests in the world as love, as compassion. So in a way, freedom perhaps doesn't normally have those connotations when we think of the word. But that's what I'm talking about, it's freedom. But particularly, it's freedom from samsara. It's freedom from the round, the wheel of life and death. It's freedom from this samsaric round. I think that's very important. Now, personally, I've never had any sort of problem in believing in rebirth, in believing that death isn't the end of this journey that we're on. I've somehow always intuited that even before I came to the Dharma. And so for me it just feels quite a natural thing to talk about, a round of birth and death and rebirth and re-death. Of course, it's not necessarily culturally natural for many of us. For many of us, we don't think like that. But nevertheless, it's important to know that that's what the Buddha taught. He said that we're on this endless round. This life isn't the only life. We've lived a multitude of lives already, without beginning. And actually there is no end to samsara. There's no end to the round of birth and death and rebirth and then death again. And in between, there's always a striving for happiness, for fulfillment. That seems to be what human beings do. All of us, we want to be happy and fulfilled and have some sense of meaning in our lives. All of us do, and we strive in various different ways. And hopefully we achieve some sort of measure of satisfaction or happiness or joy or love or connection. But it will end in death. Simply because we're born, it will end in death. And we do it all again. And we do it all again. Not consciously. It's said that unenlightened beings are compelled to take form, to take rebirth. And whereas that might sound fine, from a dharmic perspective, this round of birth and death, this wheel of life, is ultimately characterized by frustration and pain. In that this striving for fulfillment isn't achieved normally, this side of enlightenment, and it's this striving, this craving, that keeps us on the round. What is guaranteed is loss and death every time, and other things, I guess, like adolescence is guaranteed every time, unless you happen to die pre-adolescent. You are guaranteed all the normal human sort of pains. I recently went to watch 8th Grade. Have you seen 8th Grade? It's a lovely film, a wonderful film of a young girl, adolescent, growing up. It's funny, but it's also really painful. It's so painful to see this girl trapped in her own mind, wanting to be successful, popular, cool. She yearns to be cool and feels completely alone and rejected. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? Yeah. And I was thinking that we grown-ups, we've got more sophisticated ways of covering up this kind of yearning. But we do have it, don't we? We want to belong, we want to feel loved, we want to feel popular. And sometimes we may achieve that, but it's a what's the word? Somehow it feels unworthy. It feels unworthy of an adult life, if that's all we're doing. Does that make sense? Surely there must be more to life than that. Anyway, real freedom, vimutti in this sense, or vimukti, is a liberation from the compulsion to take life again and again and again. It would be a freedom from all of that. And that's, of course, what the Buddha to be, Siddhartha Gautama, was looking for when he left the palace. I'm not going to recap the going forth and the journey, but he left because he was on a quest to find what he called an answer to this wheel. He wanted something that was a response to this samsaric round. The deathless was what he was in quest of. And he was prepared to give up everything. He was prepared to give up the known, the comfort, the safety, the security of his life, the privileges that he had, the pleasures that life, the worldly pleasures that life afforded. He was prepared to give it all up because he knew that ultimately it was going to end in death, and that sort of made it all not really, well, it lost its allure for him. If you really see what life is, some of the things that we do, like watching Netflix Suits over and over and over again, which is a bit like the Wheel of Life, by the way. Each episode you think something new's going to happen, something new's going to happen, and after you've watched 5, they're only 40 minutes, but after you've watched 5 of an evening, you realise that nothing new happens. There's a new case, there's an usual worry that they'll lose. They normally win, but still things don't work out, and there's always a cliffhanger, and it's the same deal, the Wheel of Life. Anyway, the Buddha was looking for a way out, and he was prepared to give up everything to look for this, which already means that he had become, in a way, positively disillusioned with the glitter that normally holds us entranced. He'd become positively disillusioned, which is already a maturing. This is the Buddha as a young man, as a 29-year-old young man, leaving home for the noblest of reasons, for this quest. And personally, I have never been, very attracted by living a renunciate life. Yeah, I've never been drawn to giving up on the world and going forth to live a very simple a monk's life, for example. I've never quite resonated with that myth, although many people have. The word, particularly when I was young, renunciation, always felt slightly distasteful, as if Buddhism was telling me to give up on joy and give up on pleasure and satisfaction, and it seemed to just point to some sort of austere, dry, colourless world. When I look back over the 25 years or so that I've been practicing, there has been renunciation. I'm not going to talk about all the things that I've renounced. Obviously, I've got a way to go. There has been some going forth, but it's not felt painful. It's not felt dry. It's not felt colourless. It's felt like I'm glad to move towards a more satisfying, fulfilling life. It just feels joyous, actually. It feels meaningful, and it feels joyous. And it does involve letting go of security sometimes. Sometimes it means letting go of some pleasures if they're unskillful, but I feel more than compensated by the joy, the pleasures that I have had. I'm now in my 50s, and one of the well, I can honestly say that I feel if I were to die now, I would be content with the life that I've had. I feel blessed time and time again with the life I've had. And much of that is to do with other people. My teachers, Bhante Sangharachita foremost, the Buddha, of course, as his, but Bhante as his mediator for me, but other teachers and friends. And there's much more joy on the path than that might cover. But friendship for me has become a real boon that feels like, sometimes we talk about friendship as necessary to help us stay on the path. But you could think of friendship as the fruit of the path, as the outcome, the blessings of the path. And I really have been blessed by friendship. But yes, the Buddha, to be at least, was willing to renounce everything. He didn't know that there was he didn't know that there was definitely a release possible. He wasn't sure. He thought there was. And in India at the time, others were in a similar quest. Others were questing. So there was a tradition of that. But there was no guarantee. And he went off alone. And yes, he struggled for 6 years. He struggled in many ways to the brink of death. I'm not going to recap his struggles. But he was prepared to push himself to the brink of death. physically, thinking that by torturing the body he might liberate his consciousness, and realize that actually that wasn't going to work, but he was on the point of death. Anyway, where I want to pick up the story is where he's on the brink of enlightenment, So he's decided that he doesn't want to die before a final attempt at liberation, at freedom. He's been prepared to die by torturing the body and realize that that doesn't work. And then he's had an intuition, a vision, you could say, a memory, an instinct that somehow meditation and the bliss of a relaxed and absorbed mind is the way forward, is the way to liberation. So he sits under this tree, the Bodhi tree. He sits on mythically what is known as the Vajrasana, the diamond throne. The diamond throne, which is said to be mythically the axial point of the whole phenomenal world, of the cosmos. He sits there. Of course, when you look with physical eyes, it's just a tree and a grass seat, a bunch of grass. He sits there and he makes a vow. And he says, "My blood may dry up, my flesh may wither, but I will not move from this spot until I have gained freedom or death." He was prepared then to die in the attempt. So that's a huge commitment. I mean, that is the commitment, isn't it? You can't commit anything more than that. And I think had he not had that sort of determination, that sort of commitment, he may not have broken through. I think that the commitment that he made as he sat on that diamond throne, on that grass seat under the tree, on what was going to be a full moon night, that commitment was an essential part of the freedom that he did experience, the liberation that he experienced. Because I think without some determination at our level, well, I know this, that without some determination, I don't make any progress. I could lose myself in my iMac and all the rest of it, and not go anywhere in my life, actually, without some degree of determination. And that determination needs a direction and it needs a context. Ultimately, it needs some degree of commitment to the path, because there's so much in our lives and in our world that that sort of screams out at us and tries to drag us off this path. Unless we're really quite determined, we won't make progress. That might sound a bit sort of black and white. I don't mean to sound black and white. What I mean to say is that all of us can take the next step, and that will always take a little bit more of us than perhaps comes naturally. We'll need some determination. The determination will grow as you progress, as we progress, and as the fruits of practice become more apparent. Determination also grows. So currently, I have more determination than I did 10 years ago, and certainly more than I did 20 years ago. I haven't got the determination that Siddhartha Gautama had when he sat under the Bodhi tree. I've not got there yet, to say freedom or death and mean it. I haven't got there. But I know that if I carry on practicing, there's no reason why not. And I'm not unique in that. It's not that I'm special. All of us could do that. It's our birthright, and I'll come on to why it's our birthright maybe later on. But anyway, the Buddha-to-be, Siddhartha, sits there, and you probably know the story. The mythical story is some of the most dramatic bits of the whole story of the Buddha's life. Today we've heard if you were here this afternoon, some beautiful, beautiful stories of the Buddha's encounters with various people and the effect that he had on them, the transformative effect that he had on their lives. So yes, if you're fortunate enough to be here this afternoon, you'll know what I'm saying. But that was hard won. The Buddha to be wasn't at this point able to have that sort of transformative effect because he hadn't gained the liberation that he was searching for, and there was quite a struggle to undergo. And the struggle was with death. Mara is the lord of death, and Mara knows when somebody is making a determined effort to grow, and Mara is determined not to let this human being discover the truth, because it would mean a human being liberating themselves from this round of birth and death and rebirth. And that round is Mara's realm. All of it, all of this phenomenal world is the Lord of Death and his realm. So you get, first of all, a full frontal attack by Mara, well, his sons and their army attack in a very direct, confrontational, bloodthirsty way. Mythically, in some of the accounts, you have accounts of animal-headed demons flinging mountains, hurling flaming arrows, javelins, axes, all manner of weapons, trees, uprooted trees, boulders, all being hurled at this monk sitting under a tree. I imagine some sort of, army like Lord of the Rings imagines, the cataclysmic armies that you can sort of see on Netflix and things. I imagine that sort of attack, demonic horde. And of course myths are true. They speak the truth. The forces of aggression, anger, hatred, destruction will be encountered if we go inwards. If we are determined to achieve freedom in this way, vimukti, then we will have to encounter the darker aspects of our being. And that's not to say it will always be like a full frontal attack. Often it will be just petty little irritations and grievances and resentments and backbiting and unskillful speech and jealousy. That's kind of how Mara works with us. Probably because we're not sitting on that diamond throne yet. He might have a full frontal attack with his army at some point, but for us it's pretty undramatic and insidious, the forces of hatred and aggression, but they're there. And Buddhism says you can't ignore them, you have to transform them. You can't ignore them, you can't deny them, you can't pretend that you're a nice person and these things aren't happening. You have to acknowledge them with honesty, with courage, also with metta. You have to acknowledge them. The Buddha, to be, in the myth, it's as if, well, on the surface, it's like he doesn't have to do anything. These forces on the surface of things seem to transform themselves. The weapons turn into flowers that rain down at his feet. As soon as they touch his aura, he's already in the process of enlightenment. I think you wouldn't be able to do that unless enlightenment, some other perspective, was already starting to dawn. So in a way, when the story's normally told, this is the Siddhartha Gautama about to conquer Mara in order to gain enlightenment. But I think enlightenment's happening. This is the process. This is what enlightening might look like. Anyway, the Buddha remains completely equanimous. And in that equanimity, I expect that there's metta. It's not just a cool force field around the Buddha. It's love, it's metta, and his mind is already untouchable. Do you see what I mean? Because the perspective that the Buddha's mind is experiencing is already beyond this phenomenal world. So all Mara can hurl at him are the worst that this phenomenal world can throw at you. And it can throw something awful. The forces of hatred are within, as I've said, but often we'll encounter them from without. We will encounter them from without. And again, if you live a fortunate life, I've lived a very fortunate life, the forces of hatred that I've encountered have been pretty mild. But I was thinking about the people in Sri Lanka just a few weeks ago, and the forces of hatred that were unleashed on that country were devastating for hundreds, thousands probably, of people. The forces of hatred are around us, not just in Sri Lanka, in everywhere. Yeah, everywhere. They will be around us. And we will have to learn, when we meet with hatred from without, how not to respond in kind, how not to let that hatred become hatred within, and not to do that. Anyway, the forces of Mara's army are powerless. In fact, it's not just that they lose their energy and their power, the weapons turn to flowers, and that's very, very significant. The transformation of that energy is into love and beauty. The weapons turn to flowers. They don't disappear, they are transformed, and they rain down as an adornment to this man who's sitting under a tree looking, well, on the brink of liberation. And then, of course, what do you get? You get Mara thinking again, and this time it's the forces of seduction, of grasping, of craving that he unleashes in the form of his daughters, and they try and seduce Siddhartha. They're alluring to behold, beautiful, I imagine, but they're also they're whispering in his ear, and they're whispering things like, "Why are you doing this? You, in the prime of your life, with life ahead of you, you who could enjoy yourself, why are you willfully causing yourself pain? Come with us, we'll show you pleasure." That insidious voice, again, is within. And, of course, we know it's all around us. Yeah? We only have to, I don't know, look at our phones, look at the advertising on the tube, and it's everywhere. Come, enjoy yourself, and we'll show you how. It's everywhere. I get seduced by that still. Very, very alluring, very, very tempting. Because you think, sort of, where's the harm? You know, will it, does it matter? And in a sense, I don't want to give you the impression that pleasure is wrong. Pleasure is actually really important in the Dharma life. Without pleasure, we're not going to probably get very far. The heart dries up and shrivels up. It's not pleasure that's wrong. It's living a life that is dedicated to the pursuit of pleasure as if that was the sole goal of human existence. That's what's wrong. And that's what Mara and his daughters are trying to say to Siddhartha. Do you see what I mean? It's what you do with pleasure that's... pleasure itself is fine as long as it's not harming anybody, if it can be skillful. It's a life lived for... a hedonistic life that's lived with that as the sole goal, that is... in the end, well, at best it's ignoble. In the end, it can be destructive and, yeah, awful. I was just thinking about our collective kind of greed, and I don't think of myself as living a very hedonistic life, and yet I look at my life, and there's much in it that is based on greed, my iMac being the latest acquisition. But collectively, the damage that we're doing with our greed is perhaps even more terrifying than the drama that terrorists can do in Sri Lanka. But it's insidious. It happens a little bit at a time, and I bet that nobody feels that they're really doing very much damage to themselves, to others, to the world around them. I was sobered by reading, you may have read just a few days ago, some people achieved the deepest dive that has ever been achieved by humans. So some divers, I guess in a submarine, dived to 7 miles in the Mariana Trench. I don't know where that is. Anyway, 7 miles. And they found at the bottom a plastic bag. They found at the bottom a plastic bag. And you think, oh my goodness, this is tragic. It's a little emblem for tragedy, I think, from our collective greed. Anyway, the Buddha isn't affected. He's not affected by, he's not seduced. He's not going to be seduced. But interestingly, he transforms the energy. He transforms the daughters of Mara again. So it's not like he rejects them. It's not like he's saying, I'm so holy and so pure, I'm not going to be seduced by you. He teaches them. According to one mythic account, he teaches them, and he converts them to the Dharma. He converts them to the Dharma. So the weapons turn to flowers. The seductress daughters become practitioners of the Dharma. That's beautiful. And they, of course, go back to their father, Mara, and say, well, leave him alone, and also, you're not going to win with this one. You're not going to win, which only inflames Mara more. And he, of course, mounts his final assault, which is the voice of doubt. He appears himself this time in front of the Buddha, and he tries to undermine the Buddha's confidence, self-confidence, confidence in the path, confidence that the truth can be realized by a human being, by saying, what right have you got to be here? What right have you got to sit on the Vajrasana, on this diamond throne? How come you think you're good enough? And the Buddha has a dialogue with him, and he doesn't try and convert Mara, because Mara's not going to be converted. Mara's never converted. Phenomenal existence, samsara, will go on doing its thing. Even if this planet were to be destroyed and the human race were to be destroyed, phenomenal existence will go on, and there will be this round of birth and death and rebirth in some other form. Samsara doesn't end. Mara won't give up. So the Buddha just directly confronts him and says, I have every right to be here. And Mara says, what right have, on what basis do you say that? And the Buddha refers back to his countless previous lives. And in those countless previous lives, he's practiced generosity and kindness and patience and virtue of all manner. And he says that ethical foundation built up over lifetimes gives him the right to sit at the axial point of the universe. So that, I think, has something very important to say about what are the values that we can really take confidence in. Where will we find the real confidence to sit with ourselves and say, I am living a worthwhile life? Yeah? Where will we find that? It will be in our skillful actions. When we're on our deathbed, which we one day will be, and hopefully we've got time to reflect, it'll be our virtues that will be of some comfort and reassurance. That's what will enable us to feel confident in the face of death. It won't be the iMac. It won't be everything that you've achieved in your life in terms of worldly success. It won't be any of that. It'll be the virtues. Of course, where we've been unskillful will also rear its head. But the Buddha-to-be could rest on his virtues. Mara tries again and says, yeah, but who's seen you do that in previous lives? I didn't see it. And the Buddha touches the earth. He says, the earth is my witness. That the earth bears witness. It's somewhere in this myth, what it's pointing to, I guess, is that somewhere our actions are never lost. The karmic consequences of our actions are never lost. The positive as well as the unskillful and negative, they're not lost. Karma is an intrinsic law in the fabric of this phenomenal world. It's there and it will never be lost. The Buddha could touch the earth as a symbolic gesture for that truth, and the earth goddess rises up as if she is the force of nature, the force of karma itself, saying, yes, I have witnessed this man in previous lives. Anyway, Mara has to sort of slink away. He knows he's defeated. But what I was thinking is this doubt that Mara was trying to instill, this self-doubt, he was trying to hope that the monk Siddhartha would say, yes, you're right, I'm not good enough. And that voice that is quite a common one for all of us, probably at some time we've thought, I'm not good enough. I experience it. Probably all of us at some point do. And some of us in our culture are crippled by it, crippled by this self-doubt, into living such a impoverished life because we doubt whether we're capable of achieving anything. Buddhism says that this self-doubt is, not only is it really damaging in that it stops us from living, it gets in the way of us striving towards anything higher, like spiritual progress. And it's a form of conceit. It's a form of conceit, which might sound harsh, but what's been got at here is that in that voice of self-doubt, I'm not good enough, there's this sense that I'm still the center of the universe, I'm the most important thing. I'm preoccupied by myself when I'm with myself, when I'm trapped in that voice and the snare that it weaves. It's still a sort of self-preoccupation, which is a form of conceit. Similarly, if I go round with a voice that says, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, I'm the best that there's ever been, that is a form of conceit. Yeah, so I'm not good enough, I'm the best, I'm the worst, I'm the best. They're both egotism in different ways. Buddhism says that even comparing, the act of comparing with somebody else and saying, oh yeah, we're the same. You know how our culture says, we're all great, we're all the same. Nobody's better than anybody else, because that would be awful. So we're all the same, is another manifestation of conceit. Another manifestation of conceit. We're not all the same. How could we be the same? It's obvious we're not the same. Right? But that doesn't mean that one of us is necessarily, all accomplishing either. What it does allow for, though, is growth. It says that we can become more than we are. It also says that some beings are further down the path than we are. And Siddhartha Gautama, on that full moon night, was in a way on the pinnacle, sort of sitting at the pinnacle of the greatest that human being can be. That's what he was sitting at. Not in terms of physical prowess or something, but in terms of consciousness, in terms of what human consciousness can be. He was at the brink of that. And then he steps over the brink. And he steps into a dimension that we can't easily, with our senses, perceive. It's like at that point he disappears. Mara's defeated, and this monk disappears. If you were watching at that time, if you were a passerby, nothing would have happened. With your physical senses, you wouldn't have seen a thing. And yet, something sort of revolutionary has happened in the cosmos, not just internally, but in the very fabric of this phenomenal existence. Something revolutionary has happened. Siddhartha has disappeared, and a Buddha has been born. In this form, a Buddha has been born. A new type of consciousness has entered the world that had never, according to Buddhism at least, entered the world before. Never had this been achieved by a human being. So I want to try and imaginatively explore what this freedom that the Buddha attained at that point, what it might mean, what it might be like. Mara slinks away, by the way, and is defeated. He keeps pestering the Buddha for the rest of the Buddha's life. He keeps popping up, but he becomes a sort of comic figure, which I think is also quite interesting. The Buddhist texts see him as a sort of joke, really. So all of phenomenal existence, and the worst that phenomenal existence can throw at you, all the hatred, all the greed, all the delusion, all the doubt, become a joke to the Buddha. Yeah? They're nothing to take seriously, which is a hint at the perspective of the enlightened mind. So at that point, the Buddha has attained the deathless. He says, the deathless has been attained. Open are the doors to the deathless. But what does he mean? Because he does still die a death. Not immediately, but 45 years later, his body will die. So in what way was the deathless attained? It wasn't a physical immortality or freedom. I guess he was free of the round. So for the Buddha, unless he wanted to, there would have been no more rebirth. There would have been no more coming back. But even that doesn't kind of do it, because sort of so what if we don't come back? That can't be enough. I was doing a long solitary last year, and I kept sort of pondering about the goal, and I kept thinking, so is it that I need to just get off this wheel and not come back? Is that it? And in a way, yes, and in another way, it didn't feel enough. It didn't feel enough. You know, later Buddhism developed this myth of the Bodhisattva, and the Bodhisattva keeps coming back. The Bodhisattva, he or she, in whatever form, chooses to come back. They're not compelled to come back, but they choose to come back out of compassion for us who are still trapped. Anyway, the Buddha's mind is free of any sort of compulsion whatsoever. And somehow well, we say it's a new consciousness. It's a new perspective. It's a new perspective that has opened up. So I was thinking earlier, I was talking to somebody this morning, and they were asking me what I was going to talk about, and I found myself using this analogy of the enlightened mind as an ocean, of reality as an ocean. And it's one of my favourite sort of analogies, although it's got its drawbacks. And but if we don't take it literally, or if we don't take it wrongly, I think it's a wonderful image of a vast ocean that is sort of shoreless. It's without limits. It's infinite in extent and infinitely deep. If you can, well, you can't conceive of that, but if you can at least hold that idea in your mind, it's an ocean on the surface of which there are waves. There are ripples and waves, and a constant dance of movement and flow. And in this analogy, it's like the ocean is the deeper reality, that we are sort of hidden from, that we've hidden ourselves from. But the surface of the ocean is this phenomenal world, is this samsaric realm, all of it, the whole cosmos, from here to wherever the cosmos finishes, maybe it doesn't finish, this whole phenomenal universe that we think of, and if there are more than this universe, all of it is like the surface of this ocean, is like the surface of this ocean. It's the play of the ocean. It's the play, the dance of it. And we mistake the surface for everything that there is. In fact, what we do is we identify with one tiny part of the ocean. We identify with a tiny part of the surface of this ocean. And the part that we particularly identify with is this body. And we assume that this body is me. It's like a ripple on that surface identifying with itself and saying, I am the ripple. I am the ripple. And everything else is something foreign to me, alien to me, external to me. I'm the ripple. And then, of course, the ripple that I am starts to feel frightened and neurotic of other ripples, and it watches how other ripples come and go. It watches this dance of the ocean and knows that it can't last forever. It feels insecure, and it tries to shore up its own existence. That's what it's like. And an enlightened mind has no longer identified with this body, or actually with the unenlightened mind in this way. An enlightened mind has seen through that smallness, that misidentification. What happens to consciousness when we don't identify with this phenomenal existence? That includes my normal mind with its pettiness. When I stop identifying with it, when I can just see it for what it is, and all it is sort of energy in flux, temporarily crystallized in this form, when I see it for what it is, something happens to consciousness. Something incredible happens where consciousness opens up and becomes that boundless ocean. It becomes that boundless ocean. At that point, you can't say it's my consciousness, because another ripple could say the same thing. Do you see what I mean? It becomes something beyond the personal. It becomes the whole ocean, while also experiencing this phenomenal world. It's not like the ripple automatically disappears, but the identification disappears. So when Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, he still had a body, and he still would have had physical experiences and experiences through his senses. He would have navigated his way along this life, with this phenomenal world, but he wouldn't have identified with any of it. He would have seen through to a much, much larger dimension that includes this world, that includes all of this. In fact, this phenomenal world is, you could say, a manifestation of it. And we don't have a word for that. We call it, well, Buddhism refuses to define the ocean too closely. It refuses to call it God. That would be an error, it says. The Buddha says. It refuses to call it anything. It uses words. It uses words like absolute mind or the unconditioned or well, words have gone from me now. But it uses various terms, but it tries not to take any of those terms literally. In particular, what it tries to avoid is thinking of the ocean, thinking of this vast consciousness as having a substantial reality. That's really, really important. It's very easy to start thinking of it as a thing. So this is where the ocean analogy breaks down. It's easy to think that, what Jnanavaca is getting at is the ground of all being, out of which everything is made. And in the ocean analogy, that would be water. Yeah? But Buddhism says there is no ground of being. The whole thing what mind opens up to, absolute reality, can't be grasped as a thing. Things exist in time and space. Without time and space, you can't define a thing or a subject or anything substantial. This, whatever opens up, isn't in time and space. Time and space is within it, because phenomenal reality is within it. Does that why does it say make sense? Of course it doesn't make sense. But so don't feel you have to nod. Don't nod out of politeness. But nevertheless, something very beautiful is going on. It's said that when this experience arises, the incredible thing is that it can arise in a finite body. Do you see what I mean? The Buddha still had this finite form with all the limitations of the body. You know, as he grew old, and as a young man, he probably was very strong and robust, and well, he was good looking, it said, but he lived to 80. He didn't always stay strong, robust, good looking. His body deteriorated. But what's incredible is that this vastness, this infinite vastness beyond time and space, that in a sense contains everything, could be experienced in that finite form that was decaying and would one day die. And when it died, well, in a sense, nothing happened, because the Buddha had never identified with his body or his sense experience. So there was a deeper liberation at that point, which I'm not going to try and talk about. We don't know what happens when reality, manifesting as form, what happens when that form dissolves. I guess there's a reality is just reality, I guess. But it's of cosmic significance. It's as if for the first time on that day that we're celebrating today, for the first time, reality, to call it that, vastness, this infinite, was aware of itself in human form. It manifested through human form. That had cosmic significance. That's why the Vajrasana is the diamond thunderbolt, the diamond seat, the diamond throne. That's why it's got cosmic significance. Not in time and space. Time and space are within it. So it's got cosmic significance in that sense. So because what the Buddha attained is natural. I mean, he hadn't been special. He was a special man, yes, in many ways before, but it's natural what he attained. It's something to do with how things are. He just realized that you don't need to identify with smallness, with this physical, phenomenal world. And then if you realize that, naturally consciousness opens up. Because it's natural, it can happen for any of us. Do you see? That's why it's our birthright. That's why we don't have to be some special type of person in order to get enlightened. All we have to do is stop this delusion that this is all there is. This phenomenal world is all there is. That's all we have to do, is wake up from that delusion. It's like a ripple just needs to wake up to the fact that yes, it's got form, but it's not really separate. It's not a substance of its own. It doesn't have to hold on to itself. It's part of a play, of a dance. Because that's possible for all of us, as soon as there's human consciousness, this arises as a possibility. All of us can become Buddhas, and that's what makes the Buddha's teaching both, well, I find tremendously exciting, but it also makes it really challenging. It makes it challenging because that voice of doubt that says I'm not good enough, it doesn't hold any water in this case. Do you see what I mean? It's rubbish to say you're not good enough, that the Buddha can do it but I can't. That's not to say it's easy. The path does take effort. The Buddha once said that it was the hardest thing that you could do. It's the hardest thing that you can do to strive for enlightenment, to gain enlightenment. It's not easy, but it's possible. And because it's possible, to settle for any other goal is, I think, a compromise. I think it's a really tragic compromise, because we've got this birthright and then we don't live up to it. Now, for many people, they don't come across the Dharma. They've never heard of the Buddha, or they don't know what he means anyway. And it's understandable that they don't practice the Dharma. But for those of us who have, to come across this goal, to know that it's your birthright, to resonate with that, and then to not take the next step, feels to me tragic. It feels to me tragic. So in a sense, I just want us to take the next step. That's all we have to do. We have to take the next step, and we have to not lose heart. And we don't have to be perfect in order to take the next step. I'm not perfect. Bhante, my teacher, the most enlightened man that I've ever encountered, wasn't perfect. But he was at home. I know this. He was at home in that vastness. He may not have been a perfect embodiment of it, but he knew it. He was at home in that, and I know it because he's communicated a touch of it with me. I've glimpsed it in him, through him. I felt it. And when you've felt something like that, you can never doubt it. When you've glimpsed something of it, you can never doubt it. You can never then pretend that it hasn't happened. And in the stories we heard, the Buddha did that with people time and time again. What you didn't hear in these stories is, and you couldn't hear, although maybe there was an echo of it, is what actually happened. You heard something of what the Buddha said, but why was it that these people were so moved time and time again to give up everything that they had known and to become a wandering disciple of the Buddha? Why was it? Because in that encounter, I suspect they glimpsed something of what the Buddha was at home in. They glimpsed it. You can transmit it. It's like a spark. If you're open, if you're receptive, if you're sincere, if you're committed, and you're taking the next step, it won't happen automatically, normally. The Buddha thankfully decided that he was going to teach. So he got up from that diamond throne, and he spent the next 45 years wandering the plains of northern India, teaching whoever he could teach to. He decided to communicate this spark of the Dharma. And of course, thankfully, that's come down to us today. It's still alive. It's a living flame or spark. It's still going. And he taught because this experience, this vastness, his infinite consciousness, something in that experience needs to be communicated. When you've touched it, when you're a Buddha, you can't just rest in that enlightenment experience. It's not just like having a warm bath or an evening with Netflix. It's not like that. It has a compulsion, an imperative in it to help alleviate suffering. And the Buddha's way, the best way, was to communicate the Dharma and to help others free themselves from the round of birth and death. That is his compassion. Compassion is an intrinsic part of the nature of reality when you open up to it. It's the force that propelled the Buddha for the rest of his earthly days, and I believe it continues. His body may not be here, but if you open up to it, you can feel the presence and the compassion and the wisdom of the enlightened mind. It's not just that the Buddha's become enlightened. Many men and women through the ages have achieved what he achieved. And you can open up to that. We're not necessarily alone. There is Mara in this phenomenal world, and there are also Buddhas. That's phenomenal. We don't normally believe that. The path is partly a path in confidence. It's a path in Shraddha. It's a path where, as you progress, you will experience more truth, and your confidence in the truth will grow. I'm sure that's happened for all, or certainly most of us in this room. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't got some degree of Shraddha, if practice hadn't yielded some fruits. So all you've got to do is trust that and keep taking the next step. The next step might not be obvious because it's individual. The path is very individual. It's not like it's a highway code and all laid out. It's very individual. But if you want to know what your next step is, there are people in this community who could direct you, who could guide you, who could encourage you. Use this community. Use this Sangha. And I know this Sangha isn't perfect, but by golly, it's good. And sometimes when we start on the path, what we find is we find the imperfections. It's very easy to focus on those imperfections, either in ourselves, in other people, in the Sangha, in the community, or in the teachings. Very easy. There will be imperfections, there will be flaws, there will be limitations, because it's manifesting in a phenomenal world with its limitations. However, it's important to acknowledge those, but if you let them become the sole, focus of your mind, it's like you're throwing away the jewels because there's a bit of dirt on them. It's so tragic, it's so sad. Now, I'm not trying to say that Triratna is the best or the only community that you can practice in. Fortunately, if you live anywhere near London or in London, there are many, many Buddhist movements and groups that you could go to. If you've been touched by the Dharma, find a context that works for you and keep taking the next step. Keep taking the next step. Now, I believe that many of those communities will be good enough. Triratna is certainly good enough. Bhante was certainly good enough, and that's putting it mildly. So focus on what you need to do. That's what I'd urge you to do. That's what the disciples of the Buddha did. They didn't go to him and say, who is this dirty man with possibly matted hair, with rags? They saw his vision. They were captivated by him. So the path is one of deepening Shraddha. Unfortunately for us, it's also of progressive freedom. So it's not just that the ultimate freedom is the only freedom. If we tread the path, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in experiencing this in the room, if we tread the path, we will be experiencing more of this freedom. Freedom from hatred, freedom from this compulsion of pleasure. And what we will experience is more creativity, I guess, connection, joy, love, Shraddha, a sense of beauty, a sense of wonder. They're all aspects of the freedom, this ultimate freedom. We'll start experiencing that fulfillment, meaning, a sense that, yes, there's more, and that more is beautiful and worth living for and striving for. All of that is part of the fruits of the path. So yes, mainly I want to say, if we've heard something of the Dharma and it's resonated with us, if the Buddha, if we've encountered the Buddha in some way, if the Buddha's mind has touched our mind in some way, if reality has broken through even just slightly, if there's been a glimpse of this freedom in our lives, then don't let go of that. Hold on to that as the most precious guiding principle in life. The whole of our lives need to be, I think, orientated around that vision. There's much else in our lives that we may not be able to fit in easily. It's not straightforward, the path, but it is possible to orientate more and more of ourselves around the vision. I'm going to finish, I'm going to read this, and then I'll say one more thing, and then I'll finish. So this is from, probably you've heard me reading it before. It's David Foster Wallace talking about freedom. David Foster Wallace was a writer, an American writer, who died tragically. He didn't experience this freedom he experienced deep depression and he took his own life, unfortunately. But he was brilliant. He had a brilliant mind. And I'm going to read the whole thing, I think. And it's from an address that he gave to some graduation students, a commencement address, as they say in the States. Okay, so settle down for this. Because here's something else that's true. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is no such thing as atheism. There's no such thing as not worshipping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And an outstanding reason for choosing some sort of God or spiritual thing to worship, be it Christ or Allah or Yahweh or the Wiccan Mother Goddess, or the Four Noble Truths, and I recommend that one, or some infrangible ethical principles, the reason is that pretty much everything else that you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly, and when time and age start showing, you will die 1,000,000 deaths before they finally plant you. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, bromides, epigrams, parables, the skeleton of every great story. The trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. Worship power, you will feel weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out, and so on. Look, the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they are evil or sinful, it is that they are unconscious. They are default settings. They are the kind of worship you gradually slip into day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value without ever being fully aware that that's what you're doing. And the world will not discourage you from operating on your default settings. Because the world of men and money and power hums along quite nicely on the fuel of fear and contempt and frustration and craving and worship of self. Our present culture has harnessed these forces in ways that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. The freedom to be lords of our own tiny skull-sized kingdoms, alone at the center of all creation. This kind of freedom has much to recommend it. But of course there are all different kinds of freedom. And the kind that is most precious you will not hear much talked about in the great outside world of winning and achieving and displaying. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline and effort and being able to truly care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in myriad petty, little, unsexy ways every day. That is real freedom. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. So I do think that's pretty tremendous stuff. Of course, he's limited, David Foster Wallace. That freedom is, the freedom that he's talking about is really, really important, but it's part of the path. There is an ultimate freedom that I've tried to talk about as best I can. I can't really adequately talk about it because I have not achieved it myself, but it is possible. And I know that it's possible, and it's that freedom that I think we have to worship and orientate and bow down to. And if we do that, we'll live fulfilled lives. I know that. Thank you.